Fantastic. And if it's okay, I'm going to step down here so I don't fall off the stage like I did fairly recently, which is quite an embarrassing thing to do, obviously. So good morning. First of all, I'd just like to say I hope that you get everything you want out of today. The agenda, I think, looks absolutely fantastic. There's a different take that I really want to take you through around digital transformation. And that take is kind of where are we today, what's happening today, and how are organizations thinking about how transformation is really going to help them drive their agenda forward, whatever their agenda happens to be. Again, we have to say thank you to our sponsors and to all of our co-hosts. We've seen this before, so obviously I think we can move on. So let me start by giving you a little bit of background. So this is some of the things that I'm seeing, and let me give you a little bit of a take. So in terms of what I do, I look after the industry consulting team for Informatica. I cover Europe, Middle East, and Africa. But also my day job, if you like, is to be the financial services lead for that group. So a lot of what you're going to hear has a financial services flavor to it. But I speak at many different events across many different industries. And this is a common message. But some of the examples I'll give you today will come from financial services because they're the ones I know best. If I think about some of the market changes which are happening, then some of the things which you see on the slide, you probably recognize some of these. So the first one is really important to me, for example. My 90-year-old father, for example, his demands of organizations such as his bank or a retailer are very different from mine, and my requirements are very different from my son's, for example. He's in his mid-20s. So therefore, the concept of what a customer is looking for, even right now, can be very, very different based on some simple demographics, and that's only going to get worse, we think. One interesting thing I see a lot in financial services is industries going into other industries. So in the banking world, I see telecoms companies suddenly appearing in the world of banking. And 5 or 10 years ago, that would have been just wouldn't have happened, but it seems quite normal now that we're melding different industries together to try and drive value for our customer and therefore for ourselves. Some of the things that Joseph already talked about, in my world of financial services, blockchain, for example, is another one of those sort of transformational capabilities around data that people get really excited about, but are still trying to really understand, well, what does it really mean for us? And the bottom one, we're going to touch on a little bit later today, but around regulation and compliance. Thinking about some of the things that Joseph was talking about in terms of kind of the use of data, and thinking about the last word on the slide. It's the last word for a very important reason. The new data privacy regulation, GDPR. That regulation is going to put the power of what happens to our data as individuals back into our hands. So therefore, what does it mean for organizations who have and you want to use that data? Okay, we've got some, I think, fairly profound changes happening literally right now. So where is business right now? And I see this across lots of different industry sectors. I see every business in every sector having to change. And that might seem like an obvious thing to say, but I remember going to a retailer maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and their view of retail then was how retail had always been, how retail would always be. Retail has fundamentally changed. Good example of that is my son. He's a chef, so he works on social hours. He gets a lot of his food from Amazon. All of the dry goods that he has in his house, he gets from Amazon and delivered to his work by Amazon. So who would have thought a company that started by selling books online is now delivering food? And if you're a food retailer, what does that mean for your margins and for your profits? Some interesting changes happening. So businesses are being forced to change. So the conversation I have with a lot of the executives is about how they change what they do today to what they need to be tomorrow. And the point here is about building a value-add relationship with the customer. Now, that's to secure today's business, but also tomorrow's as well. So you probably know all this already, but many of the business leaders are thinking, how do we transform what we do and make sure that we're going into a more value-add relationship with our customer? So I characterize this as moving from being a service provider, and I think of my bank, for example, as being a service provider, because that's all they do. They just provide a set of services to me, and it's as simple as that. But many are moving to want to be a relationship provider, or a relationship partner is another expression which gets used. And the reason being is they're trying to find a better way of connecting to me and adding value to me, because that's how they're going to keep my business and how they're going to make more money from me. And I see three characteristics behind all of these things. The first one is about putting the client at the heart of the business. And that doesn't matter if you're in the B2C space or in the B2B space, small and medium enterprises, corporates, it doesn't really matter, but putting the customer at the heart of the business. And that's not talking about it, that's doing it. Those two are very different things. And also that shift from being product-centric to being customer-centric. Giving a good example of my bank the other day. Being a product-centric organization, I won't tell you who they are, but I have a number of products from my bank, and they sent me an email wanting to know if I was interested in a product that I already had. So you can imagine what I think about my bank when I get those kinds of emails, and that's because they're not thinking about me as a customer, they just see me as a set of products. Thinking about in relationship partner, thinking about moving more into the digital channel, particularly the value-adding interactions. And some example here from an organizational view about reducing cost and better service delivery, but also thinking about maybe new data services. So many of you in the room probably have one of these on. Anybody got a fitness tracker on? Hands up. One person. Are you telling me only one person has one of these? Oh, thank you. Two. This is like an auction. No. So the reason I say that is I use this example a lot. I'll tell you, in most audiences, most people put their hands up, okay? So that was a genuine first for me and a surprise. But the important point being is actually that's capturing an awful lot of data all the time. So the question then, how does that add value to what I do? Well, I can tell you one thing that this thing does that adds value to what I do. I keep track of my heart rate. Now, you're probably thinking that's a bit of a sad thing to do. I'm a geek, yes, but as I keep telling my wife, I am a professional geek. That's important. But actually, the reason it's quite important to me is I can, by tracking my heart rate, I get around about a 24-hour notice on when I'm getting sick. So if I'm getting a bad cold, I have about a day's notice to know that's happening because my resting heart rate shoots up to a fairly predictable level. So actually, it does have some value when you know how to interpret the data. Yeah, simple example. That's the idea about moving much more value-added interaction into the digital world, and also the digitalization of the value chain. So some examples on the right. One that really gets me really interested is around new products. So thinking about the type of products that my bank, for example, I use my bank, which is a bit awkward because actually they're a customer of ours. But I use my bank as an example because there are some really simple value-adding things they could do for me, but they just don't do today. And some of them are really, really obvious. So I travel around this region a lot. I cover thousands of miles every year. So one of the problems that I have is when I turn up in a country I haven't been to for some time, quite often my credit card doesn't work because they get this flag saying, oh, this credit card's been used in a country and we haven't seen that before or for a long time. Now, bizarrely enough, the moment I land, my phone gets turned on, so my mobile supplier knows exactly where my phone is, and I authenticate myself through my phone. So if my bank and my phone supplier could actually talk to each other, my bank would know that I was in Zagreb, and they wouldn't have to put a stop on my credit card when I went to pay my hotel bill and save myself that very awkward, embarrassing conversation of how on earth am I going to pay my bill? Yeah. Something really quite simple, but just doesn't happen today. And these are the types of things which I think we're seeing more and more of as organizations think about how they start to use data. And just to give you some examples, this is happening now. Forgive me, these are UK examples, but I think you'll probably get the point. On the left-hand side, it's a very small startup bank called Atom Bank. They're a digital-only, mobile-only. They use AI, machine learning, in terms of customer service. They are disrupting the market very, very significantly. All the way through to the right-hand side, we've got very traditional banks like HSBC. They have a traditional banking model, so they had lots of banking branches. They're closing the branches. The reason being is most of their interactions with their customers is through digital and mobile channels. So they're having to react. The example in the middle is Barclays, again, a very traditional bank. But when if I'm a Barclays customer, when I connect through the contact center, not only do I have to authenticate who I am through the usual means, name or address, date of birth, account numbers, but also through now voice recognition. They're using voice recognition to understand whether I am the person actually speaking, to give another level of security on top of that. So traditional organizations, as well as new organizations, are really embracing the use of data to help drive what's happening with their agenda. And that's kind of the key message behind this. So the big question I keep asking is, why are organizations investing so much in digital transformation? What's so important about it? So I think it's because for many of them, they can't innovate fast enough. And they see digital transformation as giving them a platform to be able to innovate at a rate of pace that means that they can stay relevant and important to their customers. And what's driving that right now is that there are a number of nimbler players. Maybe that's not a good word. But there are people who can react quicker, who are taking market share and who are taking away margin. So the previous slide, you think of that small bank called Atom Bank. They are one of those nimbler players who are taking market share and margin from the likes of the Barclays and the HSBCs, the big traditional banks. So this is happening already. So this is what's driving a lot of the transformation agendas. So if we're looking at digital transformation, what kind of outcomes are we expecting to see from this? This is quite a wordy slide. It's quite deliberate. But this is to give you a sense from one of my banking customers. What do they see as an outcome? What do we get for doing digital transformation? In some cases, it may be really simple things like the removal of paper. Yes, banks, insurance companies, many organizations still run on paper. I know it's hard to believe. They do. All the way through to improvements in service delivery, simplification in IT. There's lots of good reasons for it, but actually there's one fundamental reason, and it's this. Most organizations have worked out it's transform or die. Now that sounds like I'm making a very big, bold statement, but how many Fortune 500 companies that are around today will be around in 10 years' time? I would suggest probably not that many compared to the previous 10 years. So I think this is very, very relevant. So let's pick a particular example and let's kind of drop down a level. So I was doing this work with one of my customers recently, which is a bank, and I just said to them, so let's just kind of map out, when you talk about digital transformation, what sort of things are you talking about having to deliver? So when you're looking at the project plan, what are the things on the project plan? And here's some of them. This is not all of them. It's a bit of a subset, but it'll give you an idea for those of you who can read this. By the way, at the back, can you read any of that? No, not at all? That's okay. From this, I can't read much here either. So, But anyway, the point being in here is we've got things like digital marketing, we've got process automation, we've got mobile apps, robotics, digital data, machine learning, new platforms, a range of capabilities. I think you probably get the point. At the bottom, what then becomes quite obvious is data is fundamentally key to the success of each and every one of these. So let me show you why that's the case. This is a banking example, but very common in other industries. I did this event, something similar to this in a media event recently. Got agreement this is very similar. There are a lot of data problems already in organizations that we still haven't fixed. We are still having data problems. As you heard from Joseph, we've got a lot more to deal with, and we've got all the pressure of what's happening to our market. So therefore, adopting digital transformation and making it work is challenging just from a data viewpoint on its own. And if I think about, well, what sort of data capabilities do I now need to help me address my overall digital transformation requirements? And again, those of you at your back, my apologies, I can't see it from up front here either. But the idea being is that there's a range of capabilities I need from a data viewpoint, and these have to underpin everything I'm doing for digital transformation. And let me show you why. If I think about one of those digital transformation capabilities, and I've just picked a common one, mobile applications. So many organizations, will have a mobile app. What sits underneath that mobile app from a data viewpoint to make that mobile app work and make it successful? Well, on the right-hand side is a subset. It's some of the key data capabilities that a mobile app will need so that what happens in terms of the interaction from a customer viewpoint, it works, it's consistent, it's accurate, it's up to date, and it's timely. And the point being on the left-hand side is if we don't have this, then actually key customer segments will get lost. So we need a good mobile app, and a good mobile app actually needs the right data underneath it, and it needs the right data capabilities to deliver that data. If I think about another example from digital transformation, part of this is also about how we govern our data. Data governance is really, really important. So thinking about the type of capabilities on the right-hand side, you'll notice even if you can't read the words, the colors of the boxes have changed slightly. And what that says is from a data governance viewpoint, the data capabilities I need are similar but slightly different than the mobile example. And why do I need data governance? Because without it, in this case it's for a bank, the bank will incur higher costs and be less agile than the competitors. Remember, it's transform or die. That's the key message behind this. And third example is around, we've got the same title there, is around actually regulation and compliance. My apologies, the slide title's wrong. Is around regulation and compliance. And the point being is that this is something if you're a bank or if you're a telecoms company, you live with day in, day out. It's something you just have to do. But the important point being is regulation and compliance is also challenging. It's also really important for digital transformation. So therefore, again, on the right-hand side, you see the color of the boxes has changed slightly. Some are the same. There are some new ones on there. And what that says is for regulation and compliance, the data capabilities I need, again, are similar but not necessarily the same as the previous two. So what I'm trying to build up for you is a picture that to deliver digital transformation, the data capabilities that sit underneath each one of the things I have to deliver becomes really critically important. And let me just try and summarize that for you. So these are my digital transformation capabilities. These are the things I have to deliver. Just for one of those, that's mobile apps, here's the range of data capabilities I need to deliver. If I want to bring in data governance, that's the next set of capabilities. And if I bring in regulation and compliance, there's the next set. So the reason for putting this up is to say to you there's probably something fairly fundamental in terms of digital transformation and its success. Data is obviously very, very important to it. But given the complexity of the problem I've just described and that Joseph went through earlier, how you manage that data is equally as important. And the reason I say that is many organizations miss that very simple fact. Managing the data for digital transformation is just as important as the digital transformation itself. You can transform as much as you like, but if the data's not right, or it's the wrong data or in the wrong place at the wrong time, your transformation will fail. And remember, transform or die. So data, therefore, is the strategic asset. It might seem an obvious thing to say. Many organizations are still struggling to understand data is the most important thing, even if you're a bank or an insurance company or a retailer. So what does that mean? You need to have your data flowing around your organization. It needs to be seamless and it needs to be effortless. This may seem like I'm stating something very obvious. I can't think of a single customer that I work with who can stand up and say, yes, I recognize that's how we work. And our problem, as Joseph said, is only going to get worse. It needs to be ingested, managed, and consumed in an appropriately governed manner. I can't think of any single customer who can stand up and say, yes, that's how we operate today. And then finally, it's got to be clean and connected. It's got to be in the right place at the right time. Again, I can't think of a single customer of mine who can stand up and say, yes, that is where we are today. And what Joseph painted for you is a picture where we're going to have to deal with all of this. We've got all of these new forms of data and all this change to the world that we live in. And then we've got things like GDPR coming along to add to that complexity. So data is really at the heart of digital transformation, and how we manage data becomes probably the most important thing. So the one thing I would say, apart from remember, transform or die. Yeah, everyone got that? Transform or die? Good, excellent. Just checking, make sure you're still awake. But the important point is just thinking about data from a holistic viewpoint. And the reason I say that is it was back on one of those earlier slides. Data sits in silos, people think in silos. If we keep thinking that way, it won't be transform, it'll be die.